Hey everyone, my name is Michael, and today I want to share something very personal with you. This is the first story from my life that I'm telling on this platform, and it's one that will stir up a lot of emotions. So get ready. I call this story The Kindhearted Mother, and by the end of it, you'll understand why. It's a story that changed my life forever. So sit back, relax, and let me take you on this journey. I was born and raised in Fairfax, Virginia, in a middle-class family. My father ran 2 small businesses, and my mother was a dedicated housewife. We were a typical family, or so I thought. I was the 3rd child of 4 siblings. My older sisters, Samantha and Amelia, came before me, and then there was my younger brother, Lucas. Growing up, I had a close bond with my dad. He was hard-working, and I idolized him. Every day after school, I would join him at work, soaking up everything I could about running a business. I learned a lot from him and ended up doing half his work by the time I was in my teens. As the years went by, I got used to the routine: work with my dad, come home, and spend time with my family. My dad always had this way of making me feel like I was special. I loved how much he trusted me with his business, and I could tell I was his favorite. Life was good. That is, until things started to change. My dad was getting older, and his health started to decline. At first it was just little things: fatigue, some back pain, and then one day we found out the devastating news. He had kidney disease. It was like a dark cloud descended over our family. I watched my once strong father wither away in a hospital bed. The man who had been my hero was now too weak to even get up. He was hospitalized for days, and in those days I could sense that the end was near. And then it happened. He passed away. Losing my dad was the worst day of my life. I felt like a part of me died with him. I tried to cope in whatever ways I could. I read stories of others who had lost loved ones, stories of people who had experienced even greater tragedies. That helped a little. I joined a support group where I met people who had lost not just one family member, but entire families in accidents. That made me grateful for the family I still had. I knew I had to be strong, but it wasn't easy. A few weeks after my father's death, I knew I had to step up and take over his businesses. My dad had taught me everything I needed to know, and it was my responsibility now. I made sure the business continued to run smoothly, and every month I split the profits with my siblings. My sister Samantha had become a stay-at-home mom, Amelia was a nurse, and my brother Lucas was a teacher. Everything seemed to be settling down again. But deep inside, I still carried the weight of my father's loss. Just when I thought life was returning to some form of normal, tragedy struck again. One day, out of nowhere, my mother got seriously ill. We rushed her to the hospital, and that's when we found out she had hypoxia, a condition that affects the amount of oxygen that reaches your tissues. She became bedridden, and I spent almost every day at the hospital, sitting by her side, talking to her, and trying to keep her spirits up. Every day, she would tell me the same thing. "Michael, you should start your own business. You have to do something for yourself." I never understood why she kept saying that. I was already running my dad's businesses. Why would I need to start something new? I brushed off her words for a while, but she insisted. So, to make her happy, I opened up a small barber shop, even though my heart wasn't really in it. As her condition worsened, one evening, while I was sitting beside her in the hospital, she suddenly became very serious. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something, and it's very important. I can't take this to my grave." I didn't know what to expect, but I could see the weight of whatever she was carrying. She looked at me with desperate eyes. "There's a voice recorder in my bedroom. Go find it, and don't come back until you've listened to what's on it." I didn't argue. I promised her I would. That night, after a long day of worrying and running around, I got home and remembered what she had said. Exhausted, I searched her bedroom until I found the voice recorder hidden in a drawer. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaky as I sat down in the living room. I cracked open a soda, took a deep breath, and pressed play. Her voice filled the room. It was shaky and full of emotion. "Michael," she began, "I don't know how to say this, But you need to know the truth. You are not my biological son." I was frozen. What was she talking about? I paused the recorder, my mind racing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But I gathered myself and pressed play again. "When I married your father," she continued, "he desperately wanted a son. After having your 2 older sisters, he made it clear that if I didn't give him a boy, he would either leave me or marry someone else. I was terrified. I loved your father so much, and I didn't want to lose him. So when I got pregnant with you, I made a deal with 2 midwives at the maternity ward. If I gave birth to a girl, they would switch the baby with another woman's baby boy." I felt sick. She went on to explain that when she gave birth, it was a girl, but the midwives followed through with the plan. They took another woman's baby boy, me, and gave him to my mother. My father was overjoyed, finally having the son he always wanted. But my mother carried the weight of that secret all these years. There was a long pause in the recording before she spoke again, and when she did, I could hear her crying. "I'm so sorry, Michael. It was a terrible decision, and I've regretted it every single day of my life. Please forgive me." I sat there in stunned silence. My whole world had just been turned upside down. The woman I had loved and called Mom for my entire life wasn't even my biological mother. I didn't know how to feel. Anger, betrayal, confusion. But then I started to think about everything she had done for me. She had raised me, loved me, cared for me like any mother would. Biological or not, she was my mother. The next morning I rushed to the hospital, determined to tell her that I forgave her. But when I got there, she was in a coma. I sat by her side, holding her hand, whispering my forgiveness, hoping that somehow she could hear me. I told her that it didn't matter, that she was my mother in every way that counted. Suddenly she opened her eyes. She had heard me. Relief washed over her face, and she smiled weakly. She kept apologizing, but I assured her that everything was okay. I thought we had more time, but the next morning, I got a call at 5 a.m. It was the hospital. My mother had passed away. I couldn't believe it. I rushed to the hospital, hoping it was a mistake. But when I saw her lifeless body, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. My mother was gone. The woman who had loved me, despite the secret she carried, was no longer with us. It took me weeks to process everything. I buried myself in work, trying to keep the family businesses running and splitting the profits with my siblings. But something kept gnawing at me. Should I tell my siblings the truth? Should I reveal the secret my mother had kept for so long? I decided I needed to find my biological parents before I made any decisions. With the help of a private investigator named Daniel, we started digging into the hospital records. After weeks of searching, we found out that the woman who had given birth to me was still alive, and she had a daughter, the baby girl who had been switched with me. Her name was Ellie, and she was a dentist. When I finally met her, it was surreal. Meeting my biological family brought up a lot of emotions, joy, confusion, and even sadness for the life I never knew. But it also gave me closure. Ellie and I bonded over the shared strangeness of our situation. It turned out that her life had been relatively happy, even though she always felt like something was missing. We both agreed to stay in touch, and although it was strange to know I had a whole other family out there, it also felt oddly comforting. It made me appreciate my mom even more. She had given me a life full of love and care, even if it was built on a lie. As for my siblings, I decided not to tell them. I realized that it wouldn't change anything. My mother had made a mistake, but it was one she had paid for in guilt every single day of her life. Telling my siblings would only bring them pain and confusion, and I didn't want to do that to them. In the end, I chose to remember my mother for who she was. A kind, loving woman who had done what she thought was best for her family, even if it meant making an unthinkable decision. She had loved me like her own son, and in every way that mattered, I was her son. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. If you liked my story, let me know in the comments below. And remember, everyone faces difficult moments in life. It's how we deal with them that defines us. See you in the next story.